Dragi moji knjigoljubci, evo me u još jednom intervjuu. Imam ogromnu čast ugostiti Karolinu Ramqvist. To je švedska autorica koja je napisala nevjerojatnu, božanstvenu, prekrasnu, neobičnu knjigu koju sam upravo pročitala, Žena Medvjed, koju je prevela Lane Momirski. Knjiga je o neobičnoj povijesnoj junakinji, Ženi Medvjedu, ili ti Marguerite de La Rocque koju je život odveo s bogatih francuskih dvora u obećanje novog svijeta i onda u preživljavanju u divljini. No ovo nije priča samo o Margariti, nego je o ženi koju je prepoznaje, koju hvata, koja o njoj duboko promišlja i koja na kraju o njoj piše, a to je naša Karolina. This is a story about the heroine, but also about her writer. So welcome, Karolina, and I'm so grateful you agreed to meet with me on this Sunday morning.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
How are you liking Zagreb?
I really like it, but I still haven't been. I went to the Christmas market.
Oh, really?
Yesterday.
Oh, it was the first night, actually.
Yes. Yes. So lots of people, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm after this, I'm gonna have a few hours to just, walk around the city.
Oh,
I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, great. We really love having you here. Afterwards, you're going to Pula?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this evening.
Perfect. Let's start with the first question. It is mentioned in the book, but I would love to ask you here as well about your inspiration and motivation to write about Marguerite. Why did you decide to write about her?
Well, originally I was supposed to write a screenplay for a feature film. Mm-hmm. And I was so relieved that for once the project that I was working on was not going to be a book, because I find that everything that I encounter in life on all different levels turns into books.
You write about that in the book, and it's
like a machine somehow, and
yes.
It can be terrible, but it's also a way of living, I suppose, for a writer. And then once I started to get a bit more deep into the research and finding these, because there are three French Renaissance texts from the 16th century that sort of form the basis for our knowledge of this woman, Marguerite de La Rocque. And once I started to actually read them, at first just finding them was quite hard, but once I had found them and started to read them, I realized that I had to write a book. It's a story about the writer who discovers her story, the story about Marguerite on the island. She's marooned there in 1541. But so it's also a lot about literacy.
Yes.
And the literature, the ability to read and write. And for a woman, a young woman in 1540s, it's very rare to be able to read and write, and that ability is really important to her. So I think that was also a reason for me, to actually write the book and not just picture a film or
to in a way to recognize the context better.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why is this important to us?
As I said, there are three different accounts of her story. Three different people. One is Marguerite de Navarre, who was a French queen at the time and also a writer. Another one is Henri Touvet, who was an explorer. He had not yet been to another country, though, but he considered himself an explorer in the early age of colonialism. And the third one is François de Belforêt, who was a French-Italian writer. And I mean, they all tell this story in such different ways. A quite central part is, exploring narratives, how stories are told and what we lie about and what we omit in information, how we sort of, use stories for our own motives. All of them have their own motives for writing about her. Henri Touvet wants to, he wants to use her as a witness of the new world, so to speak. He interviews her in order for her to tell him about North America, what does it look like and what kinds of animals are there, and so on. François de Belforêt. He used her for literary reasons. He composes a song in one of his short stories about her. And Marguerite de La Rocque, I think, uses her for religious and maybe even proto-feminist reasons, telling the story about this very young woman surviving by herself on an island in the North Atlantic at a time when no one really did manage to set up a colony there. I mean, she comes there right after Jacques Cartier, after he failed to set up a colony. And I mean, modern day researchers will say that she, in effect, became the first European person to actually colonize North America, because she spent so much time there, and what she did was things, I'm not going to say what, but she did things that sort of, forms a society, even though it's a tiny society.
Quite close to society, yes. Okay, then we have the fourth teller, you. What's your, how did you say, what's your motive? What's your point of view? What did you add to the story?
Exactly. I think that's one of the main questions for the book, right?
Yes.
What's my own? Why am I using her in this sense? So it has a lot to do with the way we use stories, I think. Mm-hmm. And so for me, probably there were so many things. And one was probably that I myself felt quite isolated at the time. Yes. I had just had my second and third child quite closely. I was very, very tired and exhausted, walking around the streets of Stockholm, dark, gloomy, snowy, with this pram. And so I think I wanted to just immerse myself in something else and also mirror this kind of life that I was living in her life on the island, which is also very dark and cold. And there is, of course, something in the act of writing in itself that's very isolating.
It is.
And for me, probably starting to write, I mean, becoming a writer, which is something that I knew sort of that I wanted to do at a very young age, which was, of course, due to the books that I read as a child, but also that I had this feeling that I was very scared of living, I suppose. I'm very scared of the world. And I think I had this idea that if I could just write, it would be a way of putting everything that I was afraid of into a book and sort of managing it. I think also within the story of Marguerite, I mean, what actually happens to her on the island were those very things that I was afraid of, being a woman, starting up a family. I just gotten married to a man that I loved, and I had never imagined myself having 3 children. So all of a sudden I was, confronted with all these possibilities of loss and pain that are in living, right? Once you do love someone or you do decide to have a family. These are things that she is experiencing in different ways on this island. So I think maybe this was also something that was attracting me to her story, my own fears of pain and loss.
That's beautifully. You can really feel it when you will read the book. You will really feel Karolina in it. You're so vulnerable in this book. You're so open in it. Your experience and your points of view are so deeply interconnected with her story, you really can't pull them apart. The intimacy of the writing act, it's so prominent in this book. And you're also, wherever you read about Karolina Ramqvist, you read about feminism. And you can feel it, and the subject is feminine. You can see the read about the plot, and it's a feminist story because she was an amazing, powerful powerhouse woman. What I did read, something I really liked about describing your way of writing and your feminism is the intimacy of feminism, silent and fierce questions, in opposition of loud, I guess. However you would describe loud feminism. It's nothing bad in loud feminism, but nothing wrong with it. But your feminism is a bit discreet, intimate, very powerful, but very close. And I really like that because I think I know I struggle with where do I put myself in feminism? What is important to me in feminism or to a modern woman's? Can you tell more about this, how you would see it?
Well, I think
in
for
your
me,
writing?
I grew up with, within a sort of feminist context in Sweden, I suppose. My mother she was a Swedish journalist, and she belonged to this 1968 group of, the generation of feminists from that time. And so I think during my upbringing, I was mostly questioning some of the feminist credos, so to speak, like some of the ideas that are so fundamental for feminism, and trying to, as you're saying, trying to find my own, understanding that this is still very much needed, even though in Sweden, when I grew up, we had this quite high level of gender equality, but there was still, of course, a need for feminist ideas and thinking. Also, at that time, we were told that feminism wasn't really needed because we did have lots of freedoms for women and rights for women. Like we would have the right to vote, and we would have daycare.
The same in Croatia, especially after Yugoslavia. So it's hard sometimes to navigate.
Yes, there has been lots of social reform for women during the 20th century. Because I think there's this idea that women now should be perfect since we have all these freedoms. Maybe like the female psyche isn't necessarily evolving in the same, just because we are allowed to do whatever we want to do. Maybe it's not a given that you would, because you're still very probably affected by what it is to be a woman. It's a case of identity, of course, and something to investigate, I suppose. And also, in theory, society is equal. We can also see that usually it's not. So, but I think for me, it's always been like, within the writing, I've always been more interested in asking questions and trying to explore and investigate, and using myself and my own, doubts and fears, my own confusion, I suppose.
Confusion, that's beautiful, and you really feel it in the text, and I really, really loved it because it really encouraged me to ask questions and to, just own my own doubts. And complexity, and I really found that inspiring, not just Marguerite but also you. So thank you for that. What can we, for last question, what can we as a modern woman, what can we learn from Marguerite?
Oh, good question. I suppose, she did say that her ability to read was what saved her.
Perfect for a book blush.
Yeah, so just go on reading and writing and things perfect, I suppose.
Karolina, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure to meet with you, and so inspiring to meet you and to read your book, and I hope to read many, many more.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck with everything you have in Croatia in the next days. I hvala vama, dragi ljubci, nadam se da vam je ovo bilo zgodno, od koristi i da ćete pročitati knjigu i čitati Karolinu. Do sljedećeg intervjua. Pusa bok.